All right, so it's official. We have the Nikon Z50, which is Nikon's newest DX crop sensor camera, and it is Z mount. So it uses Nikon's suite of Z mount lenses, and we also have some new lenses coming up. So this is basically the same lens mount as a Nikon Z6 and Z7, which I'm actually using to record this video right now. They've actually been kind of my main cameras for video recording for the last couple of months, and a lot of still shooting as well. So most of what you're seeing, if you're here or following me on Instagram or something like that, is actually from the Nikon and Z6 and Z7. So I did get a chance to preview this camera a couple weeks ago. However, I haven't been able to shoot with it yet. So stay tuned for that. You can sub and turn on notifications and you'll get that video when it comes out. But there's a lot going on with these cameras, especially because they're brand new. So I want to talk about the specs, what you can expect from it, and then also some of my impressions and recommendations if you're looking at picking up this camera. Also follow me over on Instagram. I'll be doing some Q&A with this camera over there. So here in the comments below and then over there, and we'll have some cool stuff answering your questions out there on the Nikon Z50. All right, so this is a completely new body style for Nikon right here. In fact, it's the first DX Z mount in general, so very new on what we're seeing from Nikon. And it is incredibly small. It looks like what Nikon is doing here is trying to reduce the size without reducing a lot of the features that they would put in DSLRs and their Z mount cameras. So we do have things like an EVF that's center mounted. So a lot of other cameras either get rid of it, move it to the side, they get rid of the pop-up flash, but Nikon is keeping all of that in these cameras here. So it is just 14 ounces and it is a magnesium alloy body. So that's actually very good to see that Nikon is shrinking the size and weight of this, but still keeping a lot of the ergonomics and build quality and stuff like that we would expect in almost a higher end camera than this is. Not a whole lot of sacrifices when it comes to that. Now it is crazy small for the size considering that this is a Z mount camera. So this has one of the bigger and larger lens mounts here from the Z6 and Z7, which is a really cool thing, but also a bit limiting. So we'll talk about that lens system a bit more in a minute. And you'll be happy to see that we do have a flash and a viewfinder here. I don't use the pop-up flash personally on any of my cameras, but it is something that a lot of people who are looking at this camera will be happy to see. And the viewfinder being center mounted is probably a good thing as well. They are also stuffing in a very large 3.2-inch touchscreen. A lot of other cameras only have a 3-inch touchscreen. Now it is flipped down, which is kind of weird. It's probably my least favorite way of articulation. It's good that we have it and the ability to do something, but yes, it is flip down, not flip up or flip to the side, which are generally my favorites because my camera's almost always mounted to like a tripod or a stick or something like that I'm holding it with. Not necessarily holding it from the grip out, which is kind of what they say is going to be the method for self-shooting on that one. So there it is. That's just what it is. Now we do have a 20 megapixel sensor, and that is probably kind of stripped from the Nikon D7500 and D500 cameras. So we know a lot about this sensor. It is not new. It is about 3 to 4 years old with those cameras. However, it is a very good sensor and is very good in low light and things like that. So I would have liked to see something new in the last couple of years. We've seen a lot of reuse of older sensors, especially compared to the competition that is pulling out like 24 and 32 megapixel sensors. Nikon is really going to need to deliver when it comes to like low light performance to make the claim that this is a better way to go is with these lower resolution sensors. Also because we're not seeing a lot of speed advantages here, which typically come from that. So 11 frames per second, which is insanely fast. And no question about that, is way more than the average person who is going to buy this camera would ever need. However, most other cameras that are higher resolution can deliver 11 to 14 frames per second, so nothing stand out from Nikon, again, to justify that lower resolution sensor. But we do have autofocus technology that's pretty good from here. So what we're seeing on the Nikon and Z6 and Z7, it's gotten a lot better over the last year. We're looking at very similar type of performance from that. There are 209 autofocus points. It's a hybrid contrast and phase detection AF system. It's 85% coverage all over the frame, which is pretty good. Again, not legendary here. We do have things like eye autofocus. So in general, Nikon has not been the best when it comes to autofocus. However, they are probably good enough. And I would say that this would still be a solid step up from the average DSLR. And if you've been shooting on those DSLRs in live view, like a D50-600 or 7500, 7000 series in general, they're awful. So we're going to see much better live view performance from this camera. And so from a lot of people's perspective, this is actually going to be a big step up in autofocus performance. Now in video, we actually have a lot of features here. Now, again, I'm shooting on the Nikon Z6 and Z7, which have been kind of my go-to cameras for video for a couple of months now. A lot of my photos and videos that you've been seeing on Instagram or stuff like that have been shot on the Z6 and Z7. So this is going to be a great contender. We have 4K up to 30 frames per second, 1080p up to 120 frames per second. There is a record limit, it looks like, at 30 minutes, which is kind of interesting because a lot of other cameras have been able to remove this limitation because of a tax that expired. However, it still seems to be here. Now, we do have some high-end movie functions, so you're getting things like focus peaking and zebras, a lot of stuff like that. We have an HDMI out, a mic input, no headphone. That's kind of expected in these smaller end cameras, but yeah, something to keep in mind there. Given the movie quality that we've been seeing on Nikon's cameras recently, I actually expect really good results from this. So most likely we have some kind of oversampling or full sensor readout that's going to be very high quality. We'll see a little bit more on how the quality pans out when we get it in, but I expect very good things from this camera. It seems like Nikon is putting an emphasis on video now, and that's great to see. Now, Nikon has gone with the Z mount, which is probably the most controversial point of this camera, and these are Z mount lenses right here. They do have two new lenses that are coming out. So you have a 16 to 50 millimeter, which will be your main kit lens. The good side is that this is a pretty good range on this. The bad side is it's f3.5 to 6.3. So it is really going to close down your aperture at that 6.3 end, the telephoto end. And that's going to mean not great low light performance. It's going to mean it's not going to blur out your background a whole lot if you're shooting portraits. Now there's also, it is stabilized though, so that's good. And it does fold up. So a lot of Nikon's lenses right now, like this is the 24 to 70 working range. And then when you're done shooting, you can rotate it and it kind of goes more compact for travel. And that's pretty much what all of their zoom lenses have been doing. And it's what you're going to see here. So it does get incredibly small and lightweight. So that's good to see. We have a 50 millimeter to 250 millimeter as well. Again, with stabilization, pretty compact, but it is f4.5 to 6.3. So again, not going to set any records in low light. You're going to really limit yourself and have to push your ISOs. So if Nikon wants to justify that, we do need to see low light performance to kind of back that up. Now, if you want something with a wider aperture, you're going to be doing two things, either going adapters to Nikon's other lenses, or you can use all of Nikon's Z mount lenses because this is the Z mount. So here are a couple examples right here you might want to consider. The 24 to 70 f4. This is not stabilized because a lot of Nikon's higher end cameras have in-body stabilization. So keep that in mind. And this is $1,000, so not really a great step up. This is their wide angle 14 to 30. Been using that, use it a ton in Iceland. And then the 50 millimeter 1.8 is their cheapest prime lens. I think this is about $600. And then they have a 35 millimeter 1.8, about the same size, which I believe is about $850. So it's gonna get kind of expensive if you want to stick with Nikon Z lenses, except for those two kit zooms that they've got. So other than that, it will get a little bit expensive, which is kind of one of the downsides of this camera. Now the kit price is $999 with the 16 to 50, and the body only for about $860, which is not all that bad for a new camera like this. And it's going to matter a little bit more about what kind of lenses you want to use or want to take with this camera on whether or not it's kind of justified. So the big question is, should you buy it? And I think if you already own Z lenses or Nikon's DX lens or full frame F-mount lenses, this might be a decent choice for you, but otherwise probably not. And the big reason is going to be because of those lens limitations. So I like that they've gone Z mount. I think that'll be nice for the future. But in the meantime, all you have is those two APS-C lenses. So you're either going to use adapters or full frame lenses, and it's going to get very expensive when you start using this full frame glass. So unless you have Z-mount lenses already or going to be buying them, or you already have adapters, you don't mind using adapters and their F lenses, then cameras like Sony's a6400, Canon's M6 II, those have a huge supply of cheaper, wider aperture zoom lenses and prime lenses and things like that, all lined up for it, that are going to be great, a very compact and small too on those lenses. So you might want to consider those instead if you don't have any lenses right now. Let me know your thoughts on this lens. I'll throw reviews for both of those cameras right here. You can check that out. But let me know your thoughts on this camera and these lens options below. I'll be hanging out there. Also follow me on Instagram. I'll be doing some Q&A on that there. I'll be curious to know your thoughts on this. But yes, Nikon's newest Z50 camera, and it's looking pretty good. So let me know your thoughts, and we'll see you soon in some awesome videos coming up.